Airtable, like your regular spreadsheets, the Excel and Google Sheets, you're undermining almost 80% of its powers. So the real magic actually happens when you're able to harness the the futures that Airtable has to offer. And that is what we're going to talk about today in this video. Now, this is a concept a lot of people get wrong. They feel, oh, okay, so yes, Airtable, it's a spreadsheet, it's fancy, but Airtable goes beyond the fancy features and the colorful codes that you see. So today we're going to talk about linking tables in Airtable. So now, what most people do, or rather, what most beginners do when they come in contact with Airtable, they tend to just put all the information in one place: the clients, the projects, the tax, and this ends up modeling your information in a particular space. And at the end of the day, when it's time to find vital information, it gets difficult, right? So in this video, I'm going to show you how to utilize one of the powerful features that Airtable has to offer, which is called linking records. So this way you're able to create separate tables for separate reasons. So let me give you a very simple example. So you work with a company and their products, their services, their clients, and then there's still team members who have tasks to be awarded to. So let's imagine you're a project manager. Now, you wouldn't want all this information in one space. It's going to be difficult for you to find the necessary things, right? So, in this video, I'm going to walk you through the process of creating separate tables and linking them. And you see how linking tables makes your job a whole lot easier. Now let's start with a very simple example, a client's table and a bookings table. So here we have a list of clients who have booked a particular cleaning service, right? And then we have the bookings table where their requests are registered. Now, the idea is to ensure that we see the bookings for these various clients in the client's table without having to go all the way to the bookings table. Now, that's what we intend to achieve. And to do this, we would be using the link to another record. Now, I would walk you through the process of creating a link to another record, and then we'll use certain features which are, I call them co-hosts of the link to another record, and that is the lookup, the roll-up, and the count. Now, this is what makes the link to another record as buoyant as it gets. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a link to another record. Now, this is an already created column, so let's try creating another one, right? Now let's do this at the far end of our sheet just to ensure that we don't run into any confusion. Now, to be able to do that, I would click on the plus sign, which brings up all the fields in Airtable. But for the purpose of this video, we're just going to use the link to another record, and then subsequently the roll up count and the roll up, the count, and the lookup. Yes. So I'll click on the link to another record. Now, in Airtable, when you want to link a record, you have to link a record with the tables available in your database. You cannot link your record, or you cannot link a table to a table in another database. So it has to be two tables in your database that are going to be linked. So what we'll be using is the bookings table, right? Beautiful. So now we could name it client bookings. Beautiful. So I would name it client bookings, and then I can decide to allow to link to multiple records. So let's take, for example, a client has multiple bookings, or if I just want to ensure that I am choosing one client to its specific booking, then I can decide to toggle off the link to multiple records, which I can toggle off. Now, another thing I can do is I can limit it to a view. So if I've created more than one view in my booking table, now you see that all the views that I have created would show. So let's say I want to access the all bookings, and I will choose that view. Now the next thing that I'm going to do is I can decide to filter my record by a condition, right? So let's say I want to look for just clients that their bookings are paid, right? Or I want to check it via the job status. So let's say probably the 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 job status is maybe in progress, or is invoiced or quoted. So I could choose invoice as what I want, and then I can decide to use AI to show top matches, right? Now I can decide to use the client in this field. Like I can decide to choose the client's name, or I can decide to use these fields in the bookings. So now when I choose this, it would show up. You get, well, I don't want to do this. So let's just leave the space, and then I would create my field. So when I create my field, it would show up that it has been linked. But now, one very important thing you need to know when you're creating your link to another record is, after you create your link to another record, you need to populate your table, or rather, you need to populate your record. Now, when you don't populate your record, it's going to keep showing up a blank space. So now you wonder why you've created a link to another record and you've added lookup values and it's not showing. It's because you have not populated the column that links to another table. Until you do that, only then will your data show. So as you can see, I've created the column. Now it's empty, right? Because I have not populated it. So now before I populate it, let me create a lookup. Let me create lookup fields. And this brings us to lookup fields. So what are lookup fields? So lookup fields are um, broader fields that you create to not just see the information you're looking for, but various other information that spans the table. So for example, now I have decided to create a link between the client and the bookings. What if I want to see the booking ID? What if I want to see the client that owns this booking, just for seeing sake? Or since I already have the client, what if I want to see the services that the client has requested, right? Or the job status, or the total price. Now, all these are available in the bookings table. So I can decide to click on the booking ID. I can decide to click on the services requested, the job and date time. Now, in creating lookup fields, there is one thing I need you to understand. When you create a lookup field, what Airtable does is it picks your primary field. Now, your primary field is the first field present in every table that you create in Airtable. You cannot hide it, you cannot delete it, and the options of fields you can create within that column is limited. So it's like your primary identifier. So when you create a lookup field, Airtable picks up that primary field, that primary identifier, and that is what shows up on your table. So I don't need, so for the bookings table, the booking ID is the primary ID. So I don't need to toggle on the primary ID again because I already have it present. And this is even what I click on to choose my data. So I can decide to do other, to add other things, probably the job status and the total price. So let's say this 4 fields and I add it. And this is how you add lookup fields. There are other ways, there are two ways to add lookup fields. You can either come here and add a lookup field, or now the beauty of this is that Airtable already knows where you intend to get your lookup fields from. It would not go asking you where do you need to get your lookup fields from. But if you decide to add a lookup field, the second, which is by clicking on this add field icon, and if you click on this and you type lookup, what would it do? It would give you the option and it will ask you to choose a field in this table, right? So now you have to tell it the table you want it to pick the information from. Now let's say I decide I want to pick it up from feedback. It will now ask me to choose a field in the feedback table. And then when I toggle on the field I want, I can now also decide to create a condition, just like I did in the previous method. Or I can, now this option also gives me the opportunity to sort my record. So this is more versatile than the other one. Here you can sort your record, and then here you can also limit the number of items you want to see. So you can either do the first 10, the last 10, the first 20. So this gives you more flexible options, right? When you intend to create your lookup field from the main create add field option, but would not be adding this. So I just wanted to show you the two ways to create lookup fields. So now, as you can see, all these columns are empty. Why? Because I have not populated my main link to record column. So until I come here and I add a record, it would populate. And you see that it has populated. If I cancel it, everything disappears. Now, one other thing you should notice is, because now you can see I have just one record here. Why? Because I set a condition. But if I go back to my edit field and I delete the condition, um, I delete the condition and toggle off the filter record by condition and save it. When I come back to my clients table, I would confirm my change. When I come back to my clients table and click on the add, now you see it has brought out all the clients I have on this table because there's no condition that limits it. So whatever clients I choose, it will show me the service requested, the job date time, the job status, and the total price. Now, I can decide to count. Now with the count, what can I use the count for? I can use the count to so let's say I link multiple records, right? I can use the count to count how many services has this client requested, how many times does this client appear from the linked records, right? I can use the count to do that. I can even use it to count the sum of clients that I have. So if it does a count of clients 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's say a client has requested a service twice, and that requests a service 3 times, and I do a count of it all. So now I can decide to limit my table to show me the amount of services a client has to offer or has requested in a week. So that way I can have a total value of the number of cleaning requests we have for that week. Now, one other thing you would notice when you use the when you use a number column in Airtable is the fact that it gives you options. You can sum it up, you can average, median, mean, max, range, standard deviation, and you see Airtable is beautiful. It's as broad as it gets. Now let's use the count. So let's say I want to use the count, right? And I choose the count. When I choose the count, it would ask me where I want to count from. And let's say I want to count from the booking table, right? Now, what is it going to do? It is going to go and count the number of bookings per record that I choose. So when I ask you to create a field, now it would count 1111. Why? Because there is a booking table link that already exists, and for each record that I link to Airtable, sorry, that I link to from the bookings table to the client table, it will count it as one. If I add another record, it will count it as two. So let's see this work. So if I go back to my client booking and I allow link to multiple records, right? And then I save it. And if I save it and I come here and I confirm my change, now before I add another one, as you can see, the count here is 1, right? Okay, beautiful. Let's see. So let's say I add another, let me add another client here. So let's say I add another client here. Let's add Delta Homes, right? So you see, when I add now, we checked and then we saw just one record, right? So now because I have linked it to this particular link to another record, it would count the records in this link to another record. So now I've added 2 clients to my client booking column, and then what did it give? It would give me 2, right? So the next feature we're going to explore is the count, right? So now I want to count the number of records that appear in this table. So it's a way of keeping track of the number of linked records. So this is like saying, okay, so if we have a client and we have a project, right? We can count how many clients we have via a project or how many projects we have for this client. So for the sake of this, what we want to do is to count the number of clients, right, per booking. Beautiful. So now what I can do is when I come here and I click and I request for the count field, it will turn up. Now it's going to ask me which field in this table do I want to use. So now all these are existing linked records to this table in the client's table. All these are linked records within the client's table. So what I want to use is the client's booking, which is what we're working with. When I click on the client's booking and then I create, now it also gives me the option to use a condition to sort my count, but I don't want to do that. So I would create my field. Now, when I create my field, now because I have 2 clients here in this column, it will count it as 2. Now let's see. This is 2, right? Now, if I go and I delete 1 client here, the count returns to 1. So based on the records that have been linked, I have linked 1 record to 1 client, 1 booking to 1 client. Now, if a client has multiple bookings, right, I can decide to come here and add. So let's say this particular client, even though it doesn't appear twice, so let's imagine it does, right? Okay, let's use this one that does not have a name. So let's say for this first client, this client has 2 bookings. Now because I enabled the multiple link to record, which I got, which you can enable here. When you toggle on this button, it allows you to link multiple records. So because I have enabled this, right, it would now count, and it will tell me that this client has two bookings. And this is how the count field works. Now if I decide that I want to roll up, which is the last one, so basically the roll up just helps us aggregate data. So I can decide to roll up the total price, right? So I would come back here and then I'll add my roll up. I would type on roll up, it would give me the roll up field. Then I can say roll up amount, right? And let's save it as that. And then asking me which field should it choose. And I'll tell it to choose the client's booking field. Now, the roll up, because most of the because it's mostly aggregation. Now you can use the roll up to create array unique values. So that is using it with text, right? But now it would go and it will count unique values. But for this, I just want to get a sum of each bookings that a client makes, right? So I want to get the total price that each client has paid for a job that they have requested for. And when I click on the total price, I would wait for it to give me the reply I want. So here you can ask, I can decide to make it a sum. I can even change it to average, right? I can change it to average, and you see it gives me an average of the values. But let's say for the sake of this video, I want to, okay, so let's just leave it at average and see what it gives us. Now we can create our field. Now when we create our field, because this column has been populated, it shows me the average amount that this client has paid for the two bookings they have made. If I come here and I add another client here, let's say I add this client here, and when I go back and I check the count has increased to 1, and the average amount has increased to 35,000. So that's like the average amount that they get to pay, right? If I add another field here, let's say I decide to, uh, let's say this client has two bookings, and I choose, and I add one more booking, and I add one more booking. Now, when I go back here, you see the count has increased to 2, the average has increased to 25,000. So this is how you link records in Airtable, and you get to explore the features, the lookup, the count, and the roll-up field. So I hope this has helped you understand the concept of linking tables and how to use the features that make it buoyant. And these are features that make Airtable a relational database. My name is Pamela, and I am a low-code, no-code developer and a workflow automation expert. Now, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And also, don't forget to turn on the notification button for more videos. Thank you very much.